I will just kick it off with one question. And this is something I'm very, very curious about. Um, I think, Sarah, you need to pin Dicky, maybe, as the main. Oh, there he is. So here's my question, Dicky. I'm very, very curious about this choice that you and your wife made to buy land around Ranthambore and let it go wild. Um, so I would actually maybe start there and ask you, how did it occur to you and how has it worked? Because has it worked really well? And maybe the thinking about it, and maybe you can tell everyone about what you did and how it's worked out.
Um, we moved to Ranthambore, my wife and I, in 1998. Um, about a year later, I was working on a project with BBC. We were working on a documentary film, and we had to get some footage of a tiger outside the park. Ideally, a tiger walking through fields. So we went to this area, and I remember we filmed a male tiger which came out of the forest, walked at the edge of these fields, but you could clearly see that there were fields and then there were trees behind that, and drank water in a puddle and walked back into the forest. Mm-hmm. So that project got over. Then I started looking for that land, and we figured out it's privately owned with farmers, and those farmers mostly wanted to sell because wild animals used to damage the crop a lot. So at that time, we didn't really have too much of money. So we started buying it gradually. And it was kind of very inexpensive land that time, because even a four-wheel drive couldn't make it till the land. The last 1 kilometer, you had to walk down. When we bought about 25 acres of it, we fenced that whole thing. It took us about 2 years to buy that land. From the time we bought it, we had no intentions of farming. So we then fenced it and just left it. When I say just left it, we did some land work, like, basically made some bunds, made some check dams, made some small rills all across the land to hold water. So a friend of ours who used to do a lot of work with water conservation, he tried to explain to us how to really harvest water in a very complicated way, and we couldn't figure it out. Then he finally said, you just make sure that whatever rain falls on your water shouldn't go out of your land, or whatever rain falls on your land shouldn't go out of it. So we made these, 2 feet high, like walls with just soil all around the land. And then wherever there was depression, we just dug up holes there, which water fills in. And we fenced that area and we left it. And it took about 10 years before it started looking like, wild. The first 4 or 5 years, almost nothing happens. And then these bushes come, and then the trees come. And in about 12 or 13 years time or 15 years time, it was wild enough to, say, get every animal from the park. So we now have expanded it to something like 30 or 35 acres. And the thing is, this is also a long strip of land between the fields and the forest. So what I've basically done is created a buffer along almost a kilometer and a half long area, where the farmers or the grazers can't cross, go into the forest. We just did it because we could do it. For one, it did cost us a lot. It was nearly half our earnings that time every year. But the fact that we could do it was just amazing. And, the thing is, when you're living in a small town, say living in a place like Ranthambore, your expenses are pretty low. So what you save a lot of what you earn. Just nice to own a forest, even if it's 40 acres, but that's it.
And have you had other people approach you to figure out how to do this in other places?
Yes. So there are 3-4 other people who have done this around Ranthambore. The key is actually the land holding. If you do it in 5-10 acres, it's not good enough. It's good. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good enough. You do it in like half an acre, it's good enough. Yeah. Just leave it. But when I say if 5-10 acres in the, say, in anywhere in the Gangetic Plains, without touching the forest, it's not as if you're going to get wild animals. You'll get a lot of wild birds and insects and things like that, but you're not going to get deer and leopards. And I was fortunate to have got this land, touching the national park. But like right now, the house that we are building, for instance, that's in 1 acre of land. It's in the middle of a village. So we can't just leave it like that because we live here. So we started planting stuff which grows in the forest. Basically, so we just go pick up stuff from, things growing in our land. Like instead of lawn, there's a ground creeper that we put all over. There are like 8-10 types of ground creepers. All the trees are like what you find. So basically, if you get local small vegetation, like all the ground creepers and the small bushes and the flowering plants, then you start attracting local insects. Then you start getting the butterflies and the dragonflies and the bees and the hornets. And then because of that, you start getting birds that feed on them and birds that feed on the seeds of these plants. So like we grow a lot of grass, like 5 or 6 different kinds of grass. These are grasses that are found around the park, inside the park, like vetiver, which is khas. So khas is kind of cool. It grows around water bodies. When we were kids, khas was like rampant all across India, across every pond. Khas is a good-looking grass. It's tall. It's about 5-6 feet, and insane amount of birds feed on the seeds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then like the weaver birds use the stalk to build nests. A lot of other birds use the stalk to build nests. Then it becomes so thick that birds come to roost on that. Roost is like, flocks of birds come there around sunset. Just before sunset, they go inside the grass and they spend the night. And early morning, they'll be right on top of the grass and they fly out. And then they feed all over. They go inside because it's so dense that, predators like cats and small predators for the birds can't enter that. So you just grow all this around and you start getting wild animals and you need to grow wild plants and you start getting a whole lot of stuff.
So that sounds like a strategy for, there are a lot of wealthy people in this country who buy farms, right? Like I'm in Bangalore, so many people buy in Kunnur.
Yeah.
So this is a way probably that they can also create, some room for some kind of wildlife in their farms.
Yes, it is. One of the problems with a lot of wealthy people is just because they have wealth, they go with consultants and then they get a landscapist and then they start putting in plants which make their land look very pretty. But ecologically, it's pretty dead.
Right.
Like you'll have these avenue trees and then these trees which line up along the road and go in. And they're nice, pretty looking trees. But things don't feed on them, things don't nest on them, things don't. But globally there is a movement going towards changing from this. So basically, the new idea of a garden or a good landscape is that you grow stuff that either you eat or wild animals eat. When I say wild animals, I mean birds and insects. So like it's very cool if you get like this bajra. I don't know what you call it. I think pearl millet. I think that's what it's called. So around here in Rajasthan, in the rains, if you just get say half a kg of bajra seeds and sprinkle them around, they grow. And 3 months later, they have the stalk is ready with the fruit. So you don't harvest it, just leave it, and just see the amount of birds that will come.
Wow! What
so,
a great
so if you have the land, you need a kilogram of bajra seeds will cost you like what? In locally here 10 rupees. You have the land, just throw it in the monsoons. You don't even have to bury the seed, just broadcast it, and this will just come up. And about 4 months later, it'll die. If you just leave it there, the birds feed on it. When they feed, they also drop a lot of it. So next monsoon, it'll come up again. So
Oh, wow.
you got to just chuck a lot of seeds around once, and it's a grass that does very well and dry. So you have plants like this all over. I mean, uh, it's a matter of basically liking to do it, I guess.
Having the will. I think a lot of people also don't know. I'm
I
going
think
to
also
ask,
know.
yeah, I think there's a lot of low information. Like, actually, this goes to Kash, Sach, Sach Dev. Do you want to ask your question? I think this goes to his question. I think this is a question that he has. Sach, are you there? I don't know if I'm mispronouncing your name.
My
Okay.
name is Kunal. Actually, it's
Okay.
just an
Okay. Oh, it's K
automated.
Sachdev. Oh, I
It's
see.
K such day.
Okay.
So my question is from the point of view, how does a common man, contribute to conservation? Because like I understand, like a substantial amount of capital would be required to, buy a land and then
Yeah.
start with conservation. But what are the small daily things that an urban person living in the urban areas can do to contribute to conservation?
Great question.
So Kunal, so like, okay, I have created some 35 or 40 acres of forest. That is, if you see in a global perspective, that's actually no big deal, man. It's tiny. It's like, India's land mass is, I don't know what, 3 million square kilometers or something.
Correct.
This is 35 acres, 40 acres, tiny. Like if you see it on, I mean, it looks huge if you're walking there. If you drive through on a four-wheel drive, it's not so big. If you see it on Google Map, it's tiny. So end of the day, it's all tiny steps. But if everybody takes one tiny step, it collectively, with some 7 billion of us, it's huge. Now, one of the things I'd like to, say is basically, say if you talk about wildlife conservation or environmental degradation or climate change or whatever, it's all one. We can't, the problem is that because it's such a huge and such a complicated issue, we can't comprehend it, so we break it down. So we break it down into that, like I'm into wildlife conservation. You can't be into wildlife conservation if you're not into environmental conservation. So if you can't save the tigers if the climate's going to go. Like, in North America and parts of Europe, the forest fires were insane. So if you look at it, the global corporations that had sequestered carbon in forests for years, over 10 or 20 years, those forests burned down in 3 days. An entire forest, I mean, you're talking about forests the size of Maharashtra. They burned down in 3 or 4 days. So end of the day, like, if this forest, I mean, you're talking about forests which are like, 10, 20 times, 100 times the size of Ranthambore. So if we have to look at conservation, you have to look at conserving the planet. Now, when I said conserving the planet, that's also a stupid thing. Nothing's going to happen to the planet. If tomorrow oxygen dies out and the atmosphere is full of, say, carbon dioxide, the Earth is going to go on. It's you and I who will get screwed. So when we say do something for the environment, it's a very selfish need. I mean, we need to do something for the environment to save our ass. It's not we're not saving the Earth. So the easy thing which everybody can do to say for wildlife conservation or nature conservation or climate conservation or whatever is just look at your overall energy footprint or carbon footprint or whatever, or your consumption really, and cut it down by 5%.
Okay.
You don't have to cut it down by, I'm not saying that like buy a cycle tomorrow, sell your car and like start cycling to work. I mean, end of the day, even that cycle is also imported from somewhere in US or whatever, so just if you can reduce it by a bit, like say, and basically save money for yourself. Like just shut down one AC in your house. If you have 4 ACs, just remove one. That 1%, 5%. Like look at your electricity bill and have a target that I'm going to reduce this by 5%. That's it. So if you pay just for calculation sake, say 10,000 is your average electricity bill per month. If you target that, okay, I'm going to make this 9,000 and keep it at 9,000. That's a huge step. If everyone did it, like you're talking about, 20% of the load on the grid will go. So just simple stuff like that. and we have to do it every day. So we basically make a habit out of it.
Great.
That's simple. So we like, for instance, where we live, we have so much of solar panels. Rajasthan is also great for solar energy. That in the daytime we are off the grid. I don't take any electricity from the board.
Okay.
Because we don't store it, we use it in the night. So that's my way of saying that, okay, half my electricity consumption is sorted. So
Okay.
you just got to do that.
That sounds very doable, actually. That's something like, I feel like each of us can actually target that, right? I mean,
Correct.
for example, yeah, so great question. Because even recycling, I know like in Bangalore, you're expected to recycle. We painfully separate everything, but then it all goes back into one big giant.
Yeah, so recycle to some extent is greenwash. If I
Oh,
can,
really? Oh, okay.
greenwash may be too harsh a word. Recycling really works when it goes all through the system. You know, the point is, I work very hard to we recycle. I mean, we recycle, segregate, do all that stuff. But then the guy who collects it, so I got these 2 boxes which I hand over to him, and he dumps both of them in one truck.
Then there's no sense actually.
I mean, it's like, you know, that. So we would now try to just buy less packaged stuff. Again, that's not easy. I mean, like, I live in a village, so I can go get things which aren't in a plastic packet. But in a city, you don't. I mean, you don't get food with outside plastic. But the thing with better than recycle is to just get less. We consume hell of a lot, and there's a WWF study done with 2 or 3 universities, where it's a long study, pretty academic study. I'm not very academically inclined side, but the summing up of that says that if you had to put one word to all the environmental issues in the world, that word would be consumption. To everything, from climate to wildlife to anything, to our stress levels. I mean, we had a lockdown for 3 months. The earth cleaned up. And what was the lockdown essentially? That the world drastically cut down on non-essential consumption. So essentially, it wasn't as if we stopped eating, but we just cut down on non-essential consumption, and the world cleaned up, the earth cleaned up in 3 months. So that's about all it takes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Kapil. I'm going to ask Prafulla, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Sorry for not being able to turn my video on. I'm actually traveling. But I did want to know, how does one, start on the path to conservation in India? Do you need like a degree or some know-how in environmental sciences, or is there some training involved? Because as you said, some people buy land and then they just plant things that look nice without knowing what will actually help the environment and the ecology around. So how does one start?
So I don't have a training. I don't have any training really. Maybe because of the place where I live and because of the people I meet, I just learned far more than a normal person would. Then just for fun, I actually did my MSc in environmental science when I was 44 years old. I didn't finish it. Like I didn't give my second year exam. But so in India, I really don't know how to answer your question. I don't know how one goes about it. The thing is, so I'm not part of any conservation movement or any conservation organization. I'm associated with a lot of them, but I'm not really actively working for it. I just do a few things which I think will help and do it on my own, essentially. There is general lack of information, good information available, not just in India, globally. Either you get stuff which is too technical or too, scary reading, or you get stuff which is, and so basically, the simple that I mean, someone needs to do a book called Conservation for Dummies like us. You know, like give me 20 points here, which I can work on. So yes, I don't really have a clue how to answer your question, but there is need for area-wise booklet or whatever, like kind of like conservation or like Save the Planet for Dummies. And it has to be area-wise. It can't be like Bangalore has a different requirement than say where I'm living, and Bombay is a different requirement. I mean, like you have a flood issue, we have a drought issue. So the same points cannot work. Ideally, the forest department should be doing it, but they are already, if you ask me, underfunded, understaffed, and overstaffed. So I guess no one's doing it.
And well, getting on Prafulla's question, is conservation, I mean, is there a sort of, is it popular? Do you have a lot of young people coming into conservation?
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole
Now yes, a lot. Especially in the really young crowd. I mean, in the really young crowd, the crowd that's in school and still in schools and colleges, they are, most of the ones I know, they are like green warriors. I mean, my daughter has this issue with a paper tissue and with, with pretty much anything. Yeah, so the new generation is getting more and more environmentally conscious and aware. Even we are, I guess. Like say 30 years ago, your way of looking at the environment was very, very different from, or your way of looking at your environment was very different from what it is now. We're all getting slightly more conscious.
Yeah, a lot of it is also because we see.
Yeah,
in the last 30 years, I think we can see right above us.
Exactly.
It's hard to miss now.
Yeah, you can see the impact. I mean, I was last in Bangalore, and I left Bangalore in 1989. It was a forest city. It was a lake city, definitely. I mean, lakes all over. And you could go from one end of Bangalore to the other end, half an hour on a motorcycle. I mean, it takes that much to go down MG Road at times.
Yeah.
So, and every city is changed like that. And then you can imagine our growth is lopsided, like in all of Karnataka, if you want to start some kick-ass business, you have to get to Bangalore. Like in Maharashtra, you want to do something, you either have to go to Bombay or have to go to Pune. Like all of Haryana, Western UP and all, if you have to do something, you get to Delhi. So the urban centers have become scary, and because they're wealthy, the consumption levels are going insane. But overall, average Indian is still very green. Without trying to. That's because we are poor. But as we get rich, obviously your consumption levels will go up. And since there are 130 crores of us here, if we all, can you imagine India where nearly everyone has a car?
Wow. Yeah. And then don't people like us become like the rich countries telling the poor or the people who got a little bit of money finally after generations, or don't consume, No,
so don't, what the West or the, when I say West, I mean what the rich countries tell the global South is crap. That is bullshit. And there was some statistics recently that an average person in Africa consumes less power every year, consumes less energy every year than a refrigerator.
Wow, really?
Yes. Then a refrigerator does in a Then a refrigerator does in a day. I'm not saying a refrigerator in a year. A big refrigerator, the power it consumes in a day, or the environmental impact of that in a day, is what an average guy in Gabon consumes in terms of energy in a year. So that logic is warped when the West tells us that you clean up your act and you switch to EVs. Come on, dude, you guys were driving gas guzzlers. You were flying around for fun. You had your own planes. You had your power consumption was insane. Like you have the whole city lit up because it looks good. I mean,
Mm.
so your power consumption is insane. But what I'm saying is like, just because they're idiots doesn't mean that we ape them exactly like that. So as we get richer, it's our responsibility to get slightly more, what would you call it? Responsible, environmentally responsible. That's it. Like I said, it's a matter of, cutting down your electricity bill by 10%, cutting down your petrol consumption by 10%. You save money. I mean,
That's true.
Yeah, so you can buy diamonds for whatever you save out of that.
Ashika has a question. Ashika, you want to ask a question?
Hi, Aditya. Sorry, I'm traveling, so I'm going to put on my video. Wanted to know what you think about some of the man-animal conflict or mitigation approaches that you think have worked really well. I feel like in areas like Coorg, where we have plantations, a generation ago, there was very little conflict between the two. But obviously, as populations increase and all of that, those usual factors start going up, the conflict is getting worse and worse, right? And so the sentiment between man, and I think the frustration might be towards the apathy of administration or whatever it is. But what are some of the approaches that you think have worked really well to deal with man-animal conflict across India or Africa, or wherever they seem to be doing it well?
See, when we should not, I generally would not like to compare India to Africa. Our situation is very different. The thing with Africa is, because the maps are such a way, Africa actually looks far smaller than it is. It's a huge continent. It's like really massive. And the population of Africa is less than the population of India. And the area is probably some 10 times. So I think less than 100 crore people live in Africa, or less than 80 crores. I don't know the figure, but it's like pretty low. So there they still have massive stretches of wildland, pretty large stretches. Like one of the largest wilderness areas in the world is actually the Sahara Desert. The interiors of the desert are like totally untouched by man, by and large. So what works in Africa may not necessarily work here in India. Our big problem is basically with in conflict with wild animals, is that till recently we had a lot of connections between forests. We still have them, but these connections are being encroached on. They're being gradually encroached on, or whatever. I'm not saying or allotted for something, or infrastructures coming up on that. So these were the areas where animals went from one forest. Like for instance, the conflict with elephants. So basically, elephants might go a long way every year, and we're building things on the path. So they are going to go through that, and then they are going to have an issue. That's one way of it. The other thing is the big conflict, which no one really talks about because it seems very small, but the scale is insane, is crop raiding by wild animals. Pretty much all around, say, like I live barely a kilometer away from the Ranthambore National Park. About for a few kilometers outside the national park, every village, the big farmer, the biggest issue is nilgai, wild boar, and especially nilgai and wild boar coming in and grazing their crop. Second huge issue that they have is birds eating up the seeds as soon as they're planted. So like peacocks, for instance, we planted like a lot of onions on our land. So you got to make a sapling out of it and then dig that sapling in wet soil in a row. And we planted in the evening, went back home. Next morning when we reached the land, there was not a single sapling. Finally, peacocks lined up. Each one took a row, and they ate each one of them. So this actually demolishes the farm economy. So because of that, what 2 or 3 other nasty things that farmers do now is they mix they before planting the seeds, they soak them in very, very, very strong pesticides. And then they plant the seeds. So birds eat that, they kind of die on the spot. So you often have these, in the planting season around the wild areas, you'll suddenly see a lot of birds drop, dead birds all over the place. Secondly, for the bigger animals, they use stuff like live wires. I mean, so anything that comes close to it dies. Like when I say anything, it's actually laid out for maybe nilgai and wild boar, but a tiger, man, elephant, anything which comes close to it. So this is relatively it's not spectacular, so it doesn't make the news regularly, but the scale of this is insane. And when we use the word man-animal conflict, so it's not a very good word. I mean, it's a nice word from human perspective, from our perspective, because it makes it look like there's a conflict. Actually, no, it's not a conflict. We are like hammering them. A conflict is where you punch me once and I punch you back. A conflict, this is not a conflict. This is like you're punching me. I can't even hit back. So end of the day, basically, the thing is, man will be inconvenienced, but that animal would be dead. That's not a conflict. That's like, a group of civilians taking on heavily armed paracommandos. It won't be a conflict. So unfortunately, there are very few models that are working successfully. We are trying to, because it's a very complicated issue and it's not easy to control it. Like the simple solutions, like, okay, why don't you fence the farms in a big fence? So around here, like a lot of fences have started coming up now lately, but the fence stops the animal from coming out totally. So, where you would find, we used to find like black bugs have disappeared because black bugs were traditionally found on the fields. Now, so many fences have come up that they can't really go from fields to fields. So they've actually gone, totally gone. So this is not a conflict, just a wipeout. So there are very, very few models of man-animal conflict working. The model that is working is the traditional model, if you ask me. So traditional model, for instance, like say around Ranthambore, the big predators, tigers, do quite a lot of damage every year. There are at least 2 or 3 people attacked every year, not death, really, but they rarely do they lead to deaths, but it's a bad injury, very bad injury. They kill a lot of cattle, especially, and like leopards kill a lot of goats. So for the cattle herder or the goat herder, that's like devastating. Like if I have, a buffalo costs about 50,000 or 60,000 rupees. I have 3 buffaloes, and if tiger kills one of them, my net worth is down by about 33%. So it's like a huge thing for them. But despite all of this, there are very little revenge attacks. Traditionally, how cattle herders take revenge is you attack a predator kills my cattle, they go back, they get this most poison grade pesticides and syringes, and they pump the body with pesticide, pump the goat's body or whatever, the buffalo's body with pesticide using syringes. And then when the predator comes back and eats it, it dies. There are deaths of poisoning from here. There have been about 2 or 3 incidents in the last 20 years, but about 10,000 cattle must have been killed in the last 20 years, or maybe more, 20,000. So the people living around here, traditionally, because they've been living around wild animals all their lives, they have their own way of handling the conflict as such. They know the risk they live with. They know that once in a while the cattle will get. They take a lot of precautions. They'll group together with they'll get 5, 6 herders will take the herds together, and then they keep it well protected, surrounded. So these kind of measures work traditionally, and if these measures didn't work, but the amazing thing about India is There is no country in the world which has 1.3% of the global landmass and what I think 20% of the global population, and still has wild elephants, wild tigers, wild snow leopards, wild lions, wild deer, stuff like that. I mean, we have the same kind of population density as West Europe. Look at West Europe. I mean, they've decimated everything. Like our US and Canada were like insanely wild places till 200 years ago. And look at them now, they're decimated everything. We still have wildlife. Can you imagine with 130 crore people, like 10 kilometers outside Bangalore, you can find tigers. That's insane. I mean, you have leopards in Bombay. Well, I mean, you don't have leopards in New York, or you don't have pumas and daggers. So we have our own way of managing conflict. It's quite good.
So what I hear is actually it's a mindset, really.
It's a mindset, yeah. We live with, I mean, come on, we live with animals. It's part of our culture, even in pretty much any religion in India. You take any religion in India, I mean, I haven't met a single religious person or a priest or a preacher or whatever you call it, a father or a Maulvi or a pujari or whatever, who does not keep harping on the fact that you have to take care of plants and animals. They also, I mean, we have holy trees. We have like you want cut a banyan, you want do this. So wild animals and wild plants are very ingrained in our culture, and it's across every religion in India. So it's just the fact that 130 crore people in this much of land, and you have look at the amount of wildlife you have. It's pretty insane. I mean, where I'm sitting and talking to you, chances are that the closest leopard is 500 meters away from me, and the closest tiger is less than a kilometer away from me. And I'm on the internet, like here. It's quite spectacular. Like in most other parts of the world, you want to go see wildlife, you take a flight to somewhere, then you drive for like a few hours. In India, you want to see wildlife, you drive out of your city for about an hour and you start seeing things.
Great. Valta, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. Okay, so I live in Jaipur,
Yeah.
and I've been to Ranthambore a lot. And what constantly annoys me about these trips is that when we're like in a gypsy, suddenly the person who is driving it or the person who's taking us there, he gets a call that, wahan sighting hui. And like all the gypsies go running there. When I actually really enjoy being in the jungle, my aim to be in the jungle is not to see the tiger. So I keep feeling like our tourism is very specific to either a tiger or a leopard or why? I mean,
and it has turned like this. 20 years ago, it wasn't so specific. So I'll tell you a reason for it. And this is my take on it. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a reason or whatever. Till 20 years ago, what 20 years ago? Say till the year 2000. There were very few Indians who would go to forests. I'm not joking. Like I took to serious photography around that time, and there are about 500 people I know in India who used to visit Ranthambore and other parks. And for the next 4 or 5 years, that 500 became 600. It didn't go up much. So, like my first time to Ranthambore was in 1984. I was in 12th class, and we moved here in 1998. Between 1984 and 1998, I came to know about 400 or 500 people who used to travel to wildlife areas in India, and the same 400 or 500 stuck on. It was the same people. Like if I went to Bandhavgarh, you would meet the same guys, the Indians at least, yeah. And they were pretty sorted out lot. I mean, some of them were like like Kaku Bhai and all. They're 90, they're more than 90 years old right now. They still shoot here. I mean, he was when I was in teens, he was like, when I was like 20, he was 60 years old. And he would be all over the place. Literally all over the place. So then in around 2008, 9, 5, between 2005 and 2010, wildlife tourism started becoming more and more popular here. And then the popularity kept growing up, and it's getting more and more and more popular. So most people, when you first come to Ranthambore from, say, and you've never been to a wilderness area before, you think, Ajay, I'm going to Ranthambore National Park to see the tigers. Your focus is actually tiger.
Yeah.
When you drive into Ranthambore, like if you're coming from, say, Jaipur, the midway dhaba is called Tiger Dhaba. Then when you're entering Sawai Madhopur, a chai shop's called Tiger Shop. Then you have Tiger Hair Cutting Saloon, then Tiger Store, then Tiger Resort, then Tiger Day. So just Tiger, 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 Tiger. And you are convinced that you have to go see. So there is then basically the guides and the drivers, they figure out that your tip, your whatever, your better recommendations only happen if you show them the tiger. Quite often when you don't see a tiger, you come out, the guide may very sheepishly say sorry.
Yeah, he does.
You're not supposed to say sorry. I mean, I've paid you for taking me to the forest for 3.5 hours or 9 hours or whatever. I haven't paid you to show me the. I mean, you want to see the tiger? Jaipur Zoo is fantastic. At 10 rupees, you can spend the whole day there. So, but after that person has seen the tiger 5-6 times, then they start getting better. So maybe but usually what happens is because there are 130 crore of us, if even 1% of the population wants to go to a tiger reserve at least once, that will take another 30 years to get over. That quota will go on for 30 years. When there were fewer people doing traveling to wildlife destinations, then people were more specific about. I mean, there were bird watchers, and they didn't give a damn about mammals. They wanted to see birds. There were people coming here for sambar photography. But you don't really realize Ranthambore is the best place in the world to photograph sambar deer. Whether it's, how good is it for tigers or not, I wouldn't get into that. But for sambar deer, there is no other place like this. There were people coming specifically to see sambar. So if they saw a tiger, they were very happy. But if they didn't, it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. And there were people coming down for vultures. They still do. I mean, this guy who comes down from Kenya every year for a month goes all around India looking at vultures. But you get to that stage after. I mean, that guy from Kenya has probably done 30 years of watching lions and leopards in Kenya, and now he's spreading into. So this is slightly insane. I don't know how to. It drives me up the wall. So I would like, I'm a photographer, so when I go into the park, I would love to see the tiger. But we kind of reconcile ourselves to the fact that the tiger which everybody else is seeing, we're going to skip that one and hopefully find another one. 8 out of 10 times you don't find another one, but the 2 times that you do, it's your tiger. You're the only one there. And you come out with pictures which are very fresh. You can line up better, you can do. So I personally prefer to stay slightly away from where most of the vehicles are. But it's very difficult to do that. Like, if I was alone in the Jeep, you'll never see me. But then 2 friends of mine come. Now they also say, yeah, but tiger to. So unfortunately, even I'm trying the phone key. And Geo towers have changed it. Well, the network wouldn't work. Now the network started working. This is the Geo's come. So it's insane. I don't know how to sort it out. And I guess there is no solution to it. Like, I mean, if you go to Africa, then they also, the tour operator sells you the big 5. Come on, so that basically you're saying, like, out of the 400 different of some 40,000 different species there, if you are like whatever 400,000 different species there, you're going to see big 5. So it's I think it's the way it's sold also. Like, you enter Ranthambore, in the gate, there's a statue of a tiger. Why not a sambar? you build up that. I mean, we are building. I'm sorry. I mean, people like me, we are building up the hype on tiger. You know, I keep posting pictures of tigers and this and that, and like people watching it assume that, oh, you just go to Ranthambore and you see all of this. I mean, what I don't tell you is that I got all of this after 20 years. In 20 years of doing, say, 300 or 400 days, 300 safaris or 400 safaris a year. So that's, after 10,000 safaris, you've got this collection. But, you watch a National Geographic documentary where you see a hunt, a mating, and there's tigers, cubs, and then people come here for 3 days expecting to see that. They forget that the cameraman actually spent 2 years. During the 2 years of his project, he got divorced, his wife left him, his kids don't recognize him anymore, and you forget that part. And you've seen a half-an-hour movie which you want to come and see in 3 days. Nothing can be done about it. We are like that. It's a human malfunction.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that. So I am going to a sanctuary for Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm extremely excited. I'm going to Kabini,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now, like, I guess with everyone else, I'm becoming more conscious. And now suddenly I'm thinking, Acha, should I go to the safari at all? Should I be even going to this very, expensive resort? Maybe they took land away from the animals to build this for me. This whole thing is like a terrible, terrible idea. Like, you know what I mean? I don't. Is it unethical? I mean, for me to even go.
Do go for the safari. See, in Africa, the forest, in Africa, South America, USA, wherever, pretty much everywhere except for India, the wildlife department, the forest department, they say that your contribution to conservation, your contribution for conserving Yellowstone is visiting Yellowstone. What happens is, see, none of the resorts that have come up, they've almost all come up on farmlands. It's very difficult to take over forest land in India, at least for a commercial project. Like I can, say, what do you call it? In Hindi, kabja karo. I can forcibly take over 5 acres and start farming and doing. But I can't build a resort like that. The government will break it down. I mean, that 5 acres which I've taken over is kind of because it's difficult to measure. The moment I start doing anything commercial, then there are insane amount of rules. I mean, it's insane. The rules are insane. It takes years to get permission. So most of them are built on farmlands. Most of the resorts now also, because especially the better resorts. There are some. When I say better, I don't mean the more expensive ones. When I say the older ones, the ones that have been running for better, the ones that are managed better, because they get clients like you, the clients who are also aware. So they're cleaning up their environmental act quite nicely. Like in Ranthambore, for instance, now pretty much all the resorts are talking about getting rid of plastic bottles, that we don't want mineral water bottles. So they are, you're visiting there actually keeps Kavini in the highlight. Kavini in the limelight. You pay a fairly decent sum to go into the park, which goes to the forest department, which helps in conservation. So there is nothing ethical about it and unethical about it. In fact, it's good to visit that. Now, and what usually happens, especially in a country with so many people here, is that we have days when it is really rushed and then there is nobody there. That's because our vacations are such. You're not going to get, I love to visit parks between Monday and Friday. On Saturday and Sunday, I kind of get out of there and come back on Monday because no one else can visit. I mean, most people can't do Monday to Friday. Like we call Monday to Friday a weekend. Saturday, Sunday is working. But because of the vacations, Christmas, obviously it's going to be crowded. No doubt about it. But that's fine because all these reserves also have a carrying capacity limit, so they're not going to allow more than a certain limit. So do go for it. Have a good time. Really enjoy yourself.
Okay, that's great to hear. Nivedita actually has a question about photography. Nivedita.
Hello, sir. So, all the questions have been about conservation till now, but I had a photography question. So, I went through your website, some of it, and through some of your Instagram. I read this article on your website that you wrote in 2014, from a camera owner to a photographer.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering and wanted to know, with the proliferation of mobile phones and the brilliant cameras itself in phones right now,
Yeah.
how do you think the photographer term applying to a person has changed? Like okay.
It hasn't. Photographers, we now have more photographers. That's it. 40 years ago, cameras were very expensive. There were film rolls. I mean, very few people had cameras, so there were very few photographs, and there were very few. I mean, there were brilliant photographs, but in terms of numbers, there were very few brilliant photographs. I think somewhere I read that late from now 1.5 or 15 trillion pictures. Sorry, 15 trillion pictures are created every year these days globally. 15 trillion, okay, which is amazing, because now there is you're recording pretty much everything. Regarding like phone cameras, for instance, when I started like till about 7-8 years ago, we used to literally look down upon people visiting the park with a phone and trying to take pictures with a phone camera. Now I bought. So, because 7-8 years ago, phone camera was not so good. I mean, except for one or two models, like the really expensive ones, like I think, I'm not sure what it was, but 7-8 years ago would have been iPhone 4 or iPhone 5 or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So iPhone 4 onwards, the camera started getting good. iPhone 6 onwards, the cameras are really good. Then all the Androids, when Samsung and a lot of these, some of the Chinese, their cameras are really good. Now you have so the camera I use, the phone I use, sorry, I call it, I mean, it's a camera. It's my camera that I carry all the time. It also rings. So that shoots RAW format, which is what you, I mean, as a professional, as a semi-professional, that is the format I need. So RAW is like the benchmark sort of, that is the most unprocessed image that a camera captures. It shoots RAW, it shoots at big file size, so you can print them massive. It shoots videos now that are broadcast quality. I mean, pretty much all the news that you see on Indian TV, I don't see news on TV. I mean, I don't see Indian TV. Like in 6 years ago, Langurs broke our dish antenna, and we never replaced it. So we have a TV, but it's not connected to anything. So your phone camera now is broadcast quality. All the TV, most of the TV footage that you see is shot on phones. Especially post-COVID, post-lockdown, media, there was a massacre in the media. Almost 60-70% of the people lost their jobs. A lot of technical people lost their jobs. So basically now, you have say a Samsung, whatever, S8 or S9, whatever the new one is, or say you have an iPhone 11 or 12 or whatever. You need one desktop tripod or one selfie stick, one voice recording thing here, and you're broadcasting live. I mean, 5 years ago, you needed a big van with that ugly antenna on top. So phones have become stunning. The quality is really good. The issue with the phone is that it does not have the zoom or the telephoto to capture, say, images that are distant. But it's great that photography is getting more and more popular. It's great that almost everyone can now be a photographer. You can shoot like a professional without equipment. You just need a decent phone. So that is great. But there's a catch still. There will still be a difference between an average photographer and a good photographer. So even with the phone, you hand your phone over to someone who makes a living out of cameras, he will just shoot slightly better pictures. But it's good, like other nice thing about the phone is now you see a lot of pictures. So pretty much everybody, like you, even if you're not a a photographer not keen on photography, don't go on Instagram or whatever. Your regular email or messages or WhatsApp or something, you keep seeing pictures. So you're seeing far more pictures than we were 20 years ago. So your standard of a good picture is also going up, because now you're choosing between hundreds of thousands of pictures. And your skill of taking pictures is also going up, because you're seeing zillions of pictures. You go take a picture of sunset and then you see thousands of other pictures which are like gorgeous, and your picture was lousy. So next time you try to do a better sunset. That's nice. That's a great thing.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Deepta, you want to ask your question? I think we're going to wrap up just a couple more and then let Dicky go. It's sort of getting late. So Deepta?
I think he did address a part of that question already. My question was more on, what are the sort of good things that you see out of the increased tourism? Has that helped local communities?
Yes, it has. It has helped local communities. The filter down effect of tourist money is pretty awesome. Especially, you'd be shocked of the mid-range or the lower budget tourists. The really expensive tourists, their money tends to not filter down as much as, say, a backpackers, because I mean, like you book a tour through a tour operator in Bombay and come to the Oberois. Now the thing is, you paid your money to the tour operator who's paid bulk of it to the Oberois. But if you're coming as a backpacker, you're gonna take that auto rickshaw here and then go have the chai somewhere and go stay in a cheap place and go eat food outside every day. So that money is going down, filtering straight down to the. What it does is, it creates an alternative source of income where, for that group of people, living animals are far, far, far more valuable than dead animals. And it creates a pressure group. Like, say if there's a poaching incident in, say, Kabini or Ranthambore or Cobbett, it will be on the front page of every newspaper the next day. That keeps the pressure on. That, like, the authorities are going to make sure nothing happens, nothing bad happens here. But there could be some remote forests which you never hear. I mean, you never hear bad news coming out of forests from Andhra Pradesh, because they're not there in the limelight. I mean, Arunachal Pradesh lost some 70% of its entire forest in the last 30 years, but we never read about it here. Like, you cut down, you wanted to take down RA, and it was in Bombay, the RA, whatever colony, it became big news, and there was huge pressure, and the family had to take it back. So visiting wild areas is good. We need to actually work, the authorities need to work better to make wilderness travel a bit more meaningful and a bit less concentrated. You need to spread the crowd. When you go into the park, you should not see more than 4 cars, not 40. And you can spread it out. You spread it out, you also spread out the goodies. Like, the money which the local community is making, that also spreads out more.
Sarah, you want to ask your question? I think it's Sarah and then Ankita, and then we're done.
So we were talking about how there's disproportionate attention on tiger tourism. Does that also end up on disproportionate attention on conservation? Like, I hear a lot about save the tiger.
Yes, it does. Definitely. Tigers eating up other species. No doubt about it. I mean, the idea is nice. Like, the whole thing of Project Tiger that was that you conserve the keystone species, and obviously you have to conserve everything below it. Great idea. It does work. Brilliant idea. But there are a whole lot of other wild areas in India where there are no tigers. I mean, like, Great Indian Bustard is a key species for, say, the desert grasslands. Whatever, the wild ass in Kutch is the main species for, like, wolves, for instance. There were whole, like, grasslands have kind of disappeared, wetland has kind of disappeared. So tiger conservation did put the whole focus on tiger areas. In fact, the highest amount of focus went on the handful of Project Tiger reserves that we have. at the expense of other animals. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It wasn't supposed to be that way, but it somehow ended up being that way.
And is there a solution to that? Or, I mean...
There should be a solution to it. That, you know, you need to, in my opinion, you need to basically look at conserving wilderness. Like, you know, not you don't have a project tiger, you have a project wilderness. But I mean, it's just I can only have an opinion. I'm in the whole system. I'm a very tiny cog, and by and large, like, come on, all said and done, from the government's perspective, conservation is not priority.
No.
I mean, like, if you put it in perspective, okay, so NTCA, which is the project, which is, you know, agency controlling the Project Tiger, their budget has been cut down. It is now 48 crores annually. NTCA is supposed to give money to the different Project Tiger reserves. So there are 52 Project Tiger reserves. So NTCA's Project Tiger annual budget is 48 crores, and out of which about their overheads itself would be like a substantial, say 20-30%. So after that, what they have left is about 40 or 50 lakhs per year to give to every tiger. To put it in perspective, that 48 crores or 50 crores or whatever it is, Delhi's horticulture budget, that means to keep the parks and roundabouts green and flowery and things, Delhi's horticulture budget is 150 crores. So we spend 3 times more money keeping Delhi looking like a garden than we do on protecting the tiger in India. I mean, that's our perspective.
Wow. Okay, that's like really eye-opening.
Yeah.
And you would ask your last question?
Hi, so my question is about the census reports that we see.
Yeah.
How accurate are these numbers? Like, we see news of tigers increasing in the country. Is this actually happening?
Yeah. So in the last 4 or 5 years, these census results are getting really close to accuracy. You cannot have 100% accuracy just because of the animal as such. You know, tiger is called an elusive cat. Its natural instinct is to elude you. So you can't possibly count every tiger in India. Like, you can't possibly count every human being in India. But you know, lately what they've done in the last few years, because census earlier was so insane that if there was an unethical officer right in charge, he could just come out with any figure and he'd somehow convince you that it's there. Now you need camera trap images. So bulk of the census is being done by camera tracking. So like the last news that came out that the number of tigers has gone up and all, it was slightly controversial whether they've gone up or gone down, but by and large, the error margin was only some 5%. Like, I could dispute, you know, if you say that there was just for calculation, say there are 3,000 tigers, and I said no, your figure is wrong. There are 2,850. So it wasn't 2,000 and 3,000, or it wasn't 1,500 and 3,000, because out of those 3,000 tigers that they said, they literally got pictures of almost more than 60 or 70% of them, or maybe close to 80% of them. So in Ranthambore, tigers only counted if it comes in a camera trap. In Bandhavgarh, Khana, most of the central, in Kabini, all these are very heavily camera trap parks, and their figures are very, very good. Now, where these figures go slightly erratic is now because they can't possibly do camera trapping everywhere. And there are tigers in areas which are not tiger reserves. So, which are not part of tiger reserves, or which are like, you know, buffer forests, or like some areas which are not even, you can't even call them for, like the Chandrapuri area, or the tigers roaming around there, you know, that famous tigers, Avni or whatever. The area she was roaming around, it's not even a forest. I mean, there's no forest there. So, it's basically lantana growing here, wild lantana growing, you know. So they have to estimate tigers outside these reserves. Those at best can be estimates. So I would take these census figures very accurately. The fact that it's an all India operation and places like Sundarbans around, even camera trapping is very, very extremely difficult. And there are areas like where even camera trapping is extremely difficult. So there could be a 5% error margin. I don't think it will be a 10% margin. So it is. But what is scary is, so tiger numbers are going up, but what is slightly alarming is that the tiger habitat is going down. Which is, ultimately tigers breed very well. So if you have the habitat, they'll fill it. So, so the habitat going down is a bit of an alarm.
And is that why, like, now we've had, in 3 years, we've had very prominent cases where, man-eating tiger, should we be killing the tiger? And, we just very recently had one in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, but these are going, if you ask me, it's more of these just hit the limelight more. It's we've got we have a lot of could I call them, and I'd probably get lynched on YouTube for this, ill-informed activists. One golden rule about man-eating animals globally is that if it is a confirmed man-eater, you shoot it. We have this because I'll tell you what happens. Say there are people living in, like, I live in a village touching the tiger reserve. People here live with these tigers around. They once in a while lose their cattle. They lose this. Once in a while, they may even get attacked. Once in a while, the attack could also kill them. But they differentiate between an attack and a man-eating tiger. So attack is accident. Tiger, when it sees man, it almost always runs away. But if it's surprised or if it's cornered or whatever, for some time it might strike at you and run away. But when it comes to, but all these attacks, all these strikes are noisy. You can hear them. They'll come from the front. They'll roar. They'll come roaring and they'll hit you with the. But when it's man-eating, you don't see the tiger. You don't hear it. It comes from behind, hits you, breaks your neck, and takes you away. Whenever a body is eaten, then the locals go berserk. Then it's an issue. And if they see that no action is being taken, then they take action, which can be devastating, because then they don't differentiate between which tiger was a man-eater. So basically, they'll burn the forest down. Their part. There was one area here which they literally cut the forest down. Stelska had this stupid issue with leopards, where they actually released 2 leopards from the zoo under pressure from activists, and both those leopards were in the zoo for killing people. And then they went to Stelska, and I think in a span of 2 years, 4 people were killed, and some 7 leopards were killed, and 2 leopards were captured. And so it's basically, because of those 2 leopards, and 4 people also died, and some another 5-6 leopards died. So it's man-eating. You once the local authorities say that this is a man-eater, you kill it. You don't question it. You can't say that no, it's only killed 2, and 2 is not good enough because I've read Jim Corbett's book and they killed 300. So you're not going to wait for that guy to kill 300 and then take action. Secondly, we have this thing of don't kill him, tranquilize. What do you do after tranquilizing? You can't release him in any other place. So basically, after tranquilizing, you take him to a zoo and put him in a cage. Now, this is a wild animal which was used to an area of 10 to 20 to 40, depending on male, female, to 40 to 50 to 100 square kilometers of territory. And now you basically put them in an enclosure. Now, even a huge enclosure is for them equivalent of us being put in a 4 feet by 4 feet cage for the rest of our life. A lot of leopards, if they're caught in the wild, when we call them rescued, of all the words, and put them in a cage, they die because they keep banging their head on the bar to get out until they crack the skull. Tigers do that. Like a lot of wild tigers, when they put in the cage, you see that they don't have fur on top of the nose because they're just banging that cage all the time. So once you tranquilize the guy and put him in a cage, now you basically, he's never going to come out of the cage. So from the environmental perspective or from the natural perspective, he's gone, he's dead. And you put him in a cage. And zoos are not breeding tigers because tigers breed very well. All the zoos have enough tigers, they don't want more. So, this don't shoot it, tranquilize it is not a solution. It's worse than death. If you ask me, like it's more merciful to shoot that tiger than to put him in a cage, because now he's going to have, and in the wild they live for 12 to 15 years. Once you put them in a cage, they could live for 25 years because the food is guaranteed, and if they're not well, a veterinary doctor will fix them. So now basically you prolonged his death sentence by a huge thing. Animals, when they're killing people and eating them, then you have to kill them. No doubt about it.
Wow. Thank you, Dicky. I've learned so much. I think all of us learned so much. It was so eye-opening. Actually challenged a lot of conventional wisdom for us, honestly. I think we're all very dependent on what we read in the media and how things are covered. So this is very, very valuable.
It was my pleasure. And okay, we'll do send me the link when it's up on YouTube. I know I'm going to get hammered for some of the comments, but that's but okay, good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.